Okay, so today we are going deep, really deep, into a dark chapter of Japanese history, and it all revolves around this guy, Kiyoshi Okubo. And, you sent over a ton of info on this, and it's a story that might not be familiar to everyone, especially, if they're like just starting to learn about Japan. So our goal today is to like break this case down, make it clear, and, figure out why it even matters. Like, why should we care?
Exactly. It's Kiyoshi Okubo. He was a serial killer back in the 70s in Japan. Yeah, he murdered 8 women in 1971. Brutal stuff. He was eventually caught, convicted, and, well, he faced the full force of the law in Japan.
Now, you might be thinking, why should we spend time on such a grim topic, right? But these cases, they can teach us something about, I don't know, the dark side of human nature and how different cultures deal with violence, especially, within a specific historical context. Like Japan in the 70s was a very particular place. So let's rewind all the way back, okay? Who was this guy, Kiyoshi Okubo, before all this horror unfolded?
Right. He was born in 1935 in Gunma Prefecture. That's northwest of Tokyo. Kind of rural Japan. Big family, too, seventh of 8 kids. Now, right off the bat, his family background is pretty interesting. His mother, she was part Russian, and actually she was adopted by her stepfather, who was Okubo's grandfather, so a bit complicated there. And his dad, he worked for the railway, but he lost his job after World War II. Tough times, for a family that big.
And there's this other thing. The sources mentioned he was bullied, like, as a kid.
Yeah.
And, after the Pacific War started and because of his Russian ancestry, I mean, you can imagine back then Japan was, like, super focused on national unity, right?
Oh, I
Anyone who seemed, I don't know, foreign might have been treated as an outsider.
Yeah.
Yeah, it must have been tough for him.
Absolutely. Post-war Japan, super strong sense of national identity, some mixed heritage, definitely stood out. And it wasn't just that. He wasn't doing well in school either. And get this, at 11 years old, he does something really violent to a young girl. And the sources say his mother just, like, downplayed it. This right here, I think it raises a big question, right? What about those early warning signs? Like, did society fail to intervene when maybe it could have?
It's a chilling detail, that's for sure. Makes you wonder what might have been different. I mean, there's this other detail about his youth involved in black market stuff. Not entirely surprising, though. I mean, post-war Japan, lots of people were struggling trying to make ends meet.
Right. And in his early adulthood, man, super unstable. He tried night school for a bit, bounced around different jobs. One of them, he got fired for, well, basically for being a peeping Tom, which is, that's a huge red flag, right? He even tried to open a radio repair shop, but he just wasn't good at it. It failed, and then he ends up getting arrested for shoplifting. So you see this pattern emerging, right? Petty crime mixed with, these disturbing tendencies.
Yeah, it does seem like there were, like, some deep-seated issues that maybe weren't addressed, and sadly it escalated into something much more serious, right?
Oh, yeah. In 1955, he was 20 years old, and he gets convicted of rape. But, and this is important, he gets a suspended sentence. So he doesn't go to jail right away. But then, literally, just a few months later, another rape. This time, he can't avoid it. 3.5 years in prison. But even after he gets out parole in 59, he tries to rape someone else in 1960. This one, though, gets settled out of court. Probably, some kind of financial agreement. But it just shows you, right? The guy gets out of prison, and it's like almost immediately back to that violent behavior. No rehabilitation, no, like, real understanding of the damage he's causing.
Yeah, that's a really disturbing pattern. And then, here's the kicker, right? He gets married. In 1962, I mean, the guy has this history of sexual violence, and he's getting married. I can't even imagine what his wife must have gone through.
It's wild, right? He meets this woman, they date for about a year, and then they tie the knot. But the whole time, he's hiding his past. Different name, made-up life story, the whole 9 yards. They even have kids. And during all this, he publishes a book of poetry, under a pseudonym, of course. He even starts a milk delivery business. It's like he was trying so hard to build this normal life on top of all this, like, hidden darkness and lies.
Two completely different realities.
Yes.
But as we've seen, that facade couldn't last forever.
Nope. 1965, he gets busted for extortion. He was threatening a minor. And this is where it all comes crashing down. His wife finds out everything. The milk business tanks. And then, tragically, more rapes. 2 more. In 66 and 67, another prison sentence, 4.5 years this time. So by the time he gets out again in March of 71, he spent a lot of time behind bars, all for violent sexual crimes. It's a long and really messed up road that leads to these murders we're talking about.
So out he comes after all those years, all that violence. What happens next? This is where things turn truly horrific, right?
Sadly, yes. So March 1971, he's a free man again. But his wife, she wants nothing to do with him, refuses to reconcile. And from what the sources say, Okubo blamed his family for this, especially his brother and his parents. Thought they poisoned his wife against him. He was really messed up about it, even thought about hurting them. And around this time, he gets a new car, a Mazda Familia rotary coupe. Said he wanted to start a new business selling interior decorations. It's creepy, right? That this new car, meant for a fresh start, becomes the instrument of these awful crimes. So between March 31st and May 10th, 1971, barely a month and a half, he kills 8 young women in Gunma. And the way he did it, the pattern, it's just horrifying.
Yeah, let's talk about that. The sources describe a very specific MO. How did he actually find these women and carry out these murders?
Well, he would pretend to be an artist, driving around in that Mazda, and he'd approach these young women, offer them a ride. The sources say he would drive around for hours each day, like covering huge distances, looking for potential victims. It's estimated that about 30 women got into his car, and he had sexual encounters with over 10 of them. But tragically, 8 of them were murdered, their bodies dumped in various locations, and there was another woman who was raped and injured but luckily survived. You know, the whole artist thing, that's just straight up manipulation. Preying on, I don't know, maybe their dreams, their trust. And the number of victims in such a short time, it's just mind-blowing. So how did they finally catch him?
Well, this is where it gets interesting. The brother of one of the victims, she's called G in the sources, he's like the hero in all this. See, when his sister disappeared, he didn't just sit around. He started his own investigation. He started looking for her himself. And guess what? He actually spotted Okubo's car. Even noticed him acting shady near where his sister's bicycle was last seen. This guy, he was determined. He wrote down the make and license plate of the car, took it to the cops, and boom, Okubo's on their radar. And eventually the brother, along with the police, they formed this search party, and they tracked Okubo down. He was arrested on May 14, 1971, though initially it wasn't for murder. They got him for indecent assault and kidnapping related to G's disappearance. It's amazing, right? That brother's persistence was key. It shows how deeply these disappearances affected the families.
Absolutely. They didn't get him for murder right away, but that brother, he cracked the case wide open. And then, after the arrest, another woman comes forward. The one who was raped and injured. She identifies Okubo, and bang, he gets rearrested, this time for rape resulting in injury. Now, here's the thing. Okubo, he confesses to killing G, but he refuses to say where the other bodies are. Said he wanted revenge on the police. So they had to launch this massive search. Took them like 80 days to find all the victims, 80 days of searching. Imagine the agony for those families, for the whole community. It was a nightmare. And the sources mentioned that the police used some pretty unconventional tactics during the investigation, like really out there.
Yeah, they were desperate to get Okubo to talk, right? And, well, he wasn't cooperating, so they tried everything. They read him his own poetry, even stuff by, like, this German poet, Rainer Maria Rilke. They were hoping to, I don't know, connect with him on some emotional level, get him to open up, reveal the truth. And slowly, over months, this weird strategy, along with more standard interrogation methods, it worked. He confesses to the other murders and tells where the bodies are. Oh, here's a weird detail. Okubo, he hated the number 3, like really hated it. And the cops, they used that against him during questioning. It's crazy. And during all this, his wife, she files for divorce. I mean, can you blame her? It just shows you the ripple effect of his actions, how they shattered the lives of everyone around him. So the investigation wraps up. They have their guy, and the case goes to trial. What happened there? What were the key moments?
Okay, so they charged him with everything. Rape resulting in injury, rape, multiple counts of murder, abandoning the bodies. The trial starts in October 1971, and here's the weird thing, right? He pleads no comment to the charges, like he's not denying them, but he's not saying anything. But he did admit to the facts the prosecution presented. So the trial became less about, like, did he do it, and more about why. No. But even then, his motives remained pretty unclear. The court, they ordered a psych evaluation, and the report, it described him as having this abnormal personality with what they called psychopathic traits. And for people who aren't familiar with that term, it basically means lack of empathy, manipulative behavior, no remorse, and in his case, this tendency towards sexual arousal when committing these horrible acts, really dark stuff. And to make matters worse, Okubo, he disrupts the trial, fires his own lawyer, starts accusing the judges of stuff. It's chaos. But despite all that, on February 22nd, 1973, the Maebashi District Court sentences him to death. The judge was really harsh, condemned him for his lack of remorse, the pure inhumanity of his crimes. It was a powerful statement.
And unlike a lot of people on death row, Okubo, he didn't even try to appeal the sentence.
Nope. He said he wouldn't appeal, and that was it. Sentence finalized on March 9th, 1973. So the time between his sentence and his execution, it was actually pretty short compared to other death row inmates in Japan back then.
Wow. So once he was sentenced, the legal process moved really quickly. What happened after that, after the death sentence was confirmed?
Well, they transferred him to the Tokyo detention house. And get this, while he's there, he writes and publishes his prison memoir. And in it, he portrays himself as a victim and even complains about the title of the book they chose. Yeah, it's a bit much. Anyway, Kiyoshi Okubo was executed by hanging on January 22nd, 1976. He was 41 years old.
And the sources, they go on to analyze his case, even comparing it to other similar crimes in Japan. What can we learn from these comparisons? What kind of patterns emerge?
So, about his memoir, even though it used some complex language and had this anti-establishment vibe, most people saw it as pretty shallow, full of self-pity, no real remorse, no deep reflection. Experts have compared him to other Japanese serial killers who had what's called antisocial personality disorder. You know, guys like Mamoru Takuma, who was responsible for the Osaka school massacre, and Takahiro Shiraishi, the guy from the Zama murder case. And interestingly, they've also drawn parallels with a female serial killer involved in the Toyama and Nagano case. It's disturbing, but there are some similarities. You know, how they targeted young women, the deception, the way they disposed of the bodies in the mountains, and even the way they talked to the police, all vague and misleading. It's fascinating and terrifying how these patterns repeat themselves. So I gotta ask, are there any cultural or societal factors specific to Japan that might be contributing to this? I mean, beyond the individual psychology of these killers, is there something about Japanese society that makes this kind of crime more likely?
That's a really tough question, and probably something worth exploring further. But for now, the sources also mentioned that Okubo's crimes, they had a big impact on pop culture, even inspired some books and movies.
Yeah, it was such a huge, horrifying case. It left its mark. There were a few films, even a TV drama based on it. And there's this novel by a famous Japanese author, Ayako Sono. She took these events and crafted a fictional story around them, exploring the psychology and, the societal impact of the case. It's interesting that Okubo's story continues to fascinate people, even decades later. Maybe it's because it forces us to look at the darkest parts of ourselves, to confront these uncomfortable questions about why humans do such terrible things.
So, as we wrap up our deep dive into the case of Kiyoshi Okubo, what are the key takeaways for our listeners? What should they remember from all this?
While the Okubo case, it's a stark reminder of the devastating power of violence. The impact it had on those victims, their families, the whole community in Gunma, it's measurable. We know about his rough childhood, we see the escalation of his crimes, but his motives, they remain a mystery, which I think highlights how hard it is to truly understand extreme violence. Ultimately, it's a study in criminal psychology, a case that shows the lasting impact of these horrific acts on society and history.
And for our listeners who wanted to get up to speed on this case, quickly but thoroughly, well, we did it. We went from his troubled upbringing, the discrimination he faced, his descent into crime, those awful murders in 1971, the investigation, the trial, the execution. We even talked about how this case has been analyzed and compared to others, how it seeped into popular culture. But it leaves us with a big question, and I want you all to think about it. We've seen the attempts to understand Okubo through his own words, the psych evaluations, the comparisons to other criminals, but what do you think is the hardest part of truly grasping this kind of extreme violence? And why are we as a society so drawn to these stories? What does it say about us, about our need to understand the darkness and the light within humanity?